For this video, we're going to look at the idea that literature stems from culture, and we're going to look at the Native American culture and literature as our example. First thing to write down is this. Literature stems from culture. I've repeated it already, and I will continue to repeat that literature stems from culture. Any text that we read from any country, from any era, from any historical movement, always stems from the culture in which it was born. And that connection between the culture and the literature is very important to us and our study of history and literature in general. So let's look at the Native American example. You'll see that your notes template and what I've set up here is a big Venn diagram. So I have 3 separate circles to represent elements of Native American culture, what was important to Native Americans in their culture before the coming of Christopher Columbus. That's why I've designated this as pre-Columbian Native Americans. So from pre-1400, however far we need to go, to about 1600. Let's first look at nature. First note to write down is that Native American culture valued nature because of its focus on harmony and balance in the universe. There's this natural balance to some of the nature that the Native Americans were surrounded by in the American countryside. Next to look at is religion. So we did have a number of origin and creation stories, one of which we'll be looking at in class. And then there was also, for the Native Americans, the concept of divine intercession. So asking for rain or asking for sun, depending on what you needed for the earth or what you needed for your tribe at the time. And finally, we have evidence of Native American rituals. So we have dances, we have songs, we have poems, we have traditions, and things that are clearly connected to their practice of religion. Now we're going to jump to this middle section where we have the congruence of nature and religion. So here we see that nature was worshipped as a healing spirit or deity. You can see that combination between this balance of nature and then also this divine spirit. And the concept that we will recognize spirits within all creatures. So a tree has a spirit, a squirrel has a spirit, a human has a spirit, the air has a spirit, and everything is surging with this divine spirit as established by the maker or by nature or whatever it was that the tribe believed. Next we have the concept of law and the idea that the Native Americans did indeed maintain peace and peaceful relationships among all of the tribes. They had to establish laws, they had to establish rules, and in that way they also needed to establish the ideal leader. So we're going to read a constitution actually from one of the tribes that establishes what a good leader should do. How would we maintain positive and peaceful relationships among tribes? Let's look at that congruence between nature and law. Laws are intended to foster and reflect nature's harmony. For instance, the great white roots and their nature is peace and strength. So you have these roots that come from not only trees but are also some kind of a group, and their nature is peace and strength. All of this comes from the Iroquois Constitution that we will look at together. Finally, we're going to look at the connection between law and religion. That's the idea that the political leaders of the Native American tribes were also the spiritual leaders. No separation of, quote, church and, quote, state. The mentors are also the spiritual guides of the people. And as you see, these 3 things communicate with each other all the time. Nature, law, and religion, they're interchangeable. There's almost very little way that we can actually separate them in the way that we did for this PowerPoint. We're going to talk about just a few vocabulary words that we need to know. First is oral tradition, and that's the idea that Native American literature, or their stories, their songs, their poems, were passed down by word of mouth from one generation to the other, like a big game of telephone. Next is hieroglyphics. That's the idea that stories are told when they are written down through pictures or symbols that represent the sounds, the objects, or the concepts of that story. Last is going to be myths, folklore, and legends. So that's stories essentially that would explain the natural phenomenon of what was happening around that tribe, so like the hot weather or the cold weather. The nature of humans, like a creation story, and then also concepts of good and evil. So things that look very similar to what we would think of as a hero versus a trickster, or the hero being someone who's brave and just and strong and confident. going against some kind of a villain. And that's kind of the idea that here, your hero, you would have the goodness of humans, and here the tricksters would reveal the dark side of human nature. So you'll see that, I mean, a lot of this looks similar to some of the stuff that we study, right? The creation story that we study in religion, heroes and villains that we study in literature that we read, explaining natural phenomenon like you would study in science. Native American literature is this kind of wonderful combination of all of these different subjects that we can continue to study today. And I think that's it for this screencast. Just be sure that you have all of your notes written down and you submit your notes template to Canvas. Email me if you have any questions. Otherwise, I will see you in class.